Yeah, it's not a tertiary level talk if something doesn't technically go wrong. All right, hi. Welcome to my talk, Realtalk Games, Politics, and the Inescapable More of Responsibility. And whenever I say more, I do have to explain to some people that it's a toothy mouth, which always makes me think of bear traps. So I wanted something a little bit more friendly. So we're going to do Om Nom from Zepto Labs, the Cut the Rope, because he's super cute. And also, I really want this to be an approachable talk. For me, this is just terrifying. Really quickly, a couple of Twitter rules, because, hey, I'm talking about politics in games, which is a slightly controversial topic, and also I have a super Googleable name, so for my ability to sleep without anxiety at night, if you are to tweet this, please use my @name on Twitter, but please don't use my full legal name, mostly because I'm a ball of anxiety. So, before we get into this talk, I need to talk about a little bit of background, because when I first proposed it, and when you read the description, it would have been, oh, it's borrowing a lot from media and borrowing a lot from movies and literature, and that was what it was to start with, but I realized it was just really hard to digest. I was throwing names at you like Foucault and Deleuze and all this kind of stuff, and as I went through it, I realized that's kind of not the point, and also I was going to lose half the room. So the tone of this talk has changed a lot, especially since about two months ago, games industry kind of set itself on fire, and the tone of my talk was a bit like this. So I really wanted to make sure that that's not what I was bringing to the table. So the original title of my talk was, Can We Actually Make Apolitical Games? And as you can guess, that's where that was coming in. And unfortunately, it started to sound a little lectury. And not lectury and, hey, I'm a person who's educated and I'm teaching you something. It was very finger-waggy, which left the audience kind of positioned like petulant children. And I really didn't want to do that at all. That's not what I wanted. And I also had to think about the point of this talk, specifically how to hit it rather than miss it. And in dissecting, can we actually make apolitical games, I found out that was really easy to answer. I literally Googled it. And Google provided a really nice definition. And if you read those definitions, congratulations, you've answered the core of my talk. So with the academic rigor of a particular lazy try one student, okay, cool, you don't need to come anymore. So yeah, can we actually make apolitical games? No, and thanks for coming to my TED Talk. But I really thought about, why am I doing this talk and why is it important? Because of all the comments that pop up on the internet. If it was super easy and we understood politics, why is there a problem? Why do we keep seeing phrases like keep politics out of our games? And just a caveat, I'm not touching that phrase at all. I'm just touching the politics part. And if you can Google this understanding of politics, and it's really easy to see that no, you can't make an apolitical game, why do we still have people saying that kind of a sentiment? And why do we have to tackle this idea of having to make an apolitical game? So the core of this talk is not about, no, you can't make apolitical games and stop trying. The core of this talk is, what does politics mean? And I came to that actually in doing research with an interview between the campaign level designer of Modern Warfare, Jacob Minkoff, and the studio narrative head, Taylor Kurosaki, with Andy Chalk from PC Gamer, where, sarcasm aside with the article, they were claiming their game was apolitical. And as I read it, there was a really telling quote that popped up, and whether or not they agree or disagree was irrelevant. It was just how telling this quote was. The question is an apolitical game doesn't actually mean anything, as Minkoff said. What does the word political mean to you? And that was a really hard question for me to answer, because as we just Googled it, we have a nice definition of politics. It's right there. But what does political mean to you is more ambiguous. This definition is irrelevant, because that's not what we think of politics. So this talk is about unpacking this or deconstructing this. And we have to answer several questions. Can we actually make apolitical games requires an understanding of what politics are to everybody. And this isn't just, oh, that's politics, cool, definition tied up, chuck it out. It's also what they are, what they do, where they exist, and how they are inescapable. And this is how my talk came about. So we're visualizing this concept of politics like the Earth's crust, and we live nice and comfortably on the really tiniest outer layer, and we're going to have to delve into the questionable nougaty center of our planet with various degrees of difficulty, which I've conceptualized as this really cool triangle, which had a really cool effect attached to it, but unfortunately that effect hasn't carried over into GCAP, so I'm just going to make sound effects and you're going to have to pretend. So the outer layer is politics. And I use the air quotations around politics because that's exactly what I mean. It's, I don't know, it's politics. It's a word that starts with P. It's great. We have to deconstruct what they mean to you, and I say you as a collective, not you, the game players, and us, the game devs. I mean you as citizens and civilians and people who use the language English and who are a part of this civilization. What does it mean? And there we can answer, why do people get mad about them and why can't we escape them? So politics, really importantly, needs to be deconstructed or discussed in a non-academic way, because knowledge, which I have in academic spheres, is great and fantastic, but not everyone does. And trying to gatekeep knowledge, weirdly enough, is also political. So we need to engage with knowledge in a way that everyone can understand. And that's what I have to do here today. Regardless of your level of understanding, you need to understand what I'm saying. That's my responsibility as a communicator. And you as game devs are communicators. You are communicating messages. So we have to make sure that we're understood. So what do we commonly know politics to be? I'm going to distill about 2 months worth of research into 2 comments. And some of you may recognize the theory behind it, but I'm not trying to throw names out at anyone because you're all going to promptly forget it like I did in my undergraduate. So covert politics and overt politics. Covert politics, political discourse and political communication is a form of message and meaning exchange that is designed to coerce, convince or reinforce particular values, ideologies and societal norms. Again, I'm using air quotations around norms. And then overt politics, political discourse and political communication challenges the established status quo. So essentially they're the same thing. One is just a lot more obvious. Now, I want to deconstruct the word ideology really quickly, just in case anyone here didn't take my media studies class, which I'm sure most of you didn't because I don't recognize you, which is more common than you think. A set of beliefs or values that are held to be true. This is an ideology. It can occur at numerous levels: personal, social, societal, cultural, national and international. For example, an ideology in Australia is we drive on the left-hand side of the road, and the laws that reinforce this ideology allow us to literally reinforce it, but it's still an ideological standpoint. The ideology that you attend a conference, the ideology that you go to class, the ideology that you go to work and get money back, these are all norms of our society that have been constructed. An ideology is something that is seen as normal and therefore becomes enshrined through law, through societal underpinnings, through conversation, through all of these things that don't challenge it. That's still political. And politics engages with and reinforces these ideologies through the ways you don't even know they're happening. How do we know that everything we're meant to drive on the left-hand side of the road? Because all of our road structures are built around that way. Our cars are built around that way or required to be around that way. What side is the driver on? What side do we turn left and right, and what parts of the traffic are we crossing? There are all ways in which society underpins these ideological foundations, which then become norms in really, really weird ways. For example, chick flicks. And some of this idea that these movies are what women enjoy watching. And if anyone knows me, I don't really enjoy comedies of any kind. I'm more of an action, Pacific Rim kind of gal. Just monsters punching robots and I'm great. So chick flicks are an ideological standpoint. And they still have that ideology of pink is a girl's colour. They still have that weird ideology that they all involve romance for some reason, even though we have plenty of movies that involve the guy getting the girl, which are coded as masculine. Ideologies, weirdly enough, almost don't make sense unless you take all that context around them. So what are politics versus what are politics to you essentially is like a toolbox. It's all about context. A toolbox by itself is meaningless. But with tools applied appropriately, you can build tree houses and stairs and weird artsy bookshelves that serve no purpose. But we're also going to ignore the fact that they also require nails and wood and tape measure and all that kind of stuff. We're just going to get rid of that. It's just the tools for now. So politics are the interconnectivity of meaning and messages. They're the in-betweenness, the accepted and the unaccepted. The way we engage with politics is unconscious and internal, and when we engage with other people is when the politics become external. And these inform societal standards. But now that we understand it, cool, it's, again, talk over. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk where I did a really long-winded definition of the Google definition of politics. Why is there still a problem? Well, I actually found, weirdly enough, an answer to that in the same article with the creators of Modern Warfare, where Jacob Minkoff said this really telling phrase. Do we touch topics that bear resemblance to the geopolitics of the world we live in today? Hell yeah. But that's the subject matter of modern warfare. As we're telling a story that has anything, are we telling a story that has anything to do with the specific governments of any countries that we are portraying? No. So if you're asking, is Trump in the video game? No, he isn't. And that's kind of my aha moment. It's not about politics. It's about how relevant these politics are to me. Because politics, as the world understands it, has a place. And it belongs to politicians. I'm assuming because of the name, I don't know. It's their job. It belongs in the place where the politicians live. It's in the politician house, where all the politicians go and earn way too much money, where they decide the future for people. They get enshrined in law. That's the safe place for politics. And ne'er shall it leave there. That's where politics belong. We wrap them up in this nice package so they're palatable for us to digest, these long-reaching consequences. But the problem with that is politics as a tool don't stay there as much as we want them to. They're great for building houses, for example, but we don't want them to build houses right next door to us. Even though we live in a house currently, and even though our house is comfortable and there's a roof over it and tools were used to make it, don't build it next door to me because that inconveniences me. I want to get to sleep. And then it becomes an intrusion. So now that we've understood politics as best as we can casually understand politics in about 10 minutes, we move into the next layer of our weird teal triangle, which is intrusion. And this is where a lot of people are. They're in this idea of politics is intruding into their place where politics doesn't belong. It's out of the politician's house, and now it's bothering me in my living room. It's when politics are in your face. It's when politics are not where they are normally. Those things like representation and equality and positivity and, weirdly enough, be nice. Apparently being nice to people is political. Who knew? Enforcing politics that makes people be nice to each other is shoehorning in politics. And I'm not going to lie, I forgot where shoehorn is when I Googled it, yet that's a shoehorn. Hands up who in here at least knows what that is. Thank God. Because every time I say it to some younger generations, they literally think it's a shoe with horns on it. It doesn't belong, it's weird. The analogy works, right? But a shoehorn should be to ease something nicely into a tight fit. So to me, it's like, oh, you've made it palatable. No, you're shoving it in there where it doesn't fit. And then again, we have that reoccurring word, normally. There are games that have tried to tackle this idea of politics. Life is Strange 2 specifically by Dontnod definitely went out there with that. They threw it out there with various levels of success, saying that everything's political. But the one line that I really want to draw attention to was when this character utters the phrase, "You are the reason we need to build that wall," to a Hispanic character. And so when I watched streamers play this moment, they had two responses. One was, wow, look at this racist character that's been coded to be a racist, and I acknowledge that this character is a racist. And the other response was, wow, thanks for introducing politics into my game. Like, you're just really being unsubtle about it. It's just right there in my face. And those are two really valid responses, and this is the really important part about this discussion. They are valid even if we disagree with them, and we need to tackle them as valid responses. Other games that have tried have met with various responses. For example, Battletech by Harebrained, where they introduced they-them pronouns, got immediately review bombed on Steam for them. And Celeste, when they put two tiny inclusive flags behind a computer, that found its way all over the internet. Even super AAA productions, when they put a woman in a traditionally non-woman role, gets this politics thrown at them. You're using politics, you're throwing it into our faces. But it's really important to understand that for the people who are receiving this and who are putting that sentiment out there, they feel like a level of trust has been broken. And it's important to acknowledge that, whether or not you agree. For these people, they're just chilling in their living rooms playing video games, and then someone kicks in their door in a really amateurish way as far as they're concerned, and starts waving politics in front of their face. And so these people, for whom they've never had to actively think about politics, think that there is an intruder, which leaves them feeling super defensive, which is understandable. Because the piece of media that was a message conveyance, they were saying, hey, this is great, this is saying something, I'm having fun, is now saying something about them. And that's really confronting for some people. And so this idea of, can we make an apolitical game, is immediately thrown out because, not because we made a political game, but it's just because we made them aware of the politics that are in it, that are at play. And if you're in a marginalized community that has had to fight this fight before, if you are a person of color, or if you're disabled, you're well aware of this. Someone kicked down your door a long time ago and threw politics in your face, whether or not you're aware of it. And for these people, we could probably say, yeah, we know what it's like to be on the internet where someone's willing to tell us what they think about us constantly. Welcome to the party. Enjoy your stay. But unfortunately, that is a numerical majority now that is feeling those politics. And they have a lot more volume behind them than minorities do. And now I don't want to equate anything, and this is not an attempt to equate, but this is a means that we could approach with understanding that they feel defensive and they feel distressed, and sometimes you just gotta pat them and let them do that. And we as game devs sometimes just have to weather that storm and acknowledge this is a person in distress, whether or not we agree, and we let them have their temper tantrum, and we go on with what we want to do. Because this is a natural human response. This isn't a response of someone who sets out and chooses to be mean, or someone who sets out and chooses to be an arsehole. They are among them, I'm not gonna deny that. But the general response is natural and human, to want to defend yourself. They feel like they've been attacked, whether rightly or wrongly. And there is a level of understanding we can approach that. But regardless of what understanding you have a decision to make. You keep going with what you're doing, or you stop. That is the choice you have. So now we reach the next layer of the teal triangle. Negotiation, which a lot of people are currently doing. They try to make apolitical games so we don't stir up the hornet's nest. We try and claim that games aren't political. We don't say the P word, and they're not political. We're safe. Just don't mention it. Or not including anything that falls under the banner of politics. And a lot of people are doing this, and you can't fault them because not everyone can fight that fight. Not everyone can stand in front of the storm of vitriol and be okay on the other end. If we are advocating for self-care, we also have to acknowledge when people aren't willing to be that fighter. So the exchange then is when someone does stand up and make the decision to do that, we support them. We protect them. We give them the foundations. Because what they're doing is they're neatly packaging up their games to fit into that palatable idea of politics. The downside is when everyone starts doing that, it starts becoming a contract, that this is what games do, that it's set in stone. Don't touch it. Look, but don't touch. And then that's so enshrined that whenever you do touch it, everyone turns into a hissing cat. Stay away from it. This is the flip side of what negotiating en masse is with a vocal audience, which leaves you walking on eggshells and exhausted and tired and stressed. And eventually it's fruitless. Because even though you want to negotiate with your audience, you don't want to stray into that idea of politics. You are obeying it regardless. You cannot escape that. It's like the idea of a Newton's cradle. Every time you swing one ball down, the next ball comes up the same level. And I want to introduce something that elicited some amusement from me because it just made me feel good. Newton's law of motion, we're going to change that a little bit to Newton's law of media. That idea of politics and representation. Every action has an equal and opposite weird reaction in ways we probably didn't expect. I do borrow some stats here from film, for example. 2018, someone did a research piece on representation, male and female representation, which I apologize is unfortunately very binary, but that's the world we still live in. The reason I'm saying this is when you deal with 100%, for one side to go up, the other side must go down. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with inequality, or inequality of representation, when you try and make it equal, one side is going to perceptually lose out. And trying to avoid that doesn't change the fact that it has to happen to go to equality. And no matter how you slice it, that looks like less. And if we're going back to that cycle of feeling threatened, they are going to feel like they're having stuff removed from them, and you're going to have to let them have their tantrum. Because for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction means every time you are catering or dodging or trying not to represent, you are contributing to erasure. Every time you placate, you are contributing to a normative ideology. And for every act of avoidance where you don't want to fight that fight, you are asking someone else to do that for you. And for some of us, that's what we need. We can't fight that. I made that decision to stand up here, that I'm willing to do that. Hopefully, I can impart something on you. Otherwise, angry tweets later, it's fine. But it's kind of like Scylla and Charybdis from the Greek mythology, which I thought was really appropriate. And also, there's a more. If you try and dodge one, you will stray towards the other. You can't avoid it. You have to pick which one you want to fight. You can fight Scylla, or you can try and skirt around Charybdis. You can't dodge both of them. And this is what politics is in games. In any media. This isn't a sanctuary that games exist in that nothing else does. You can't escape it. Because when you avoid it, you are obeying opposite politics. When you are entering into it, you are dodging other politics. And it is in everything. How many MMOs have you played where you go to a potentially primitive native person and kill them for their stuff? How many games do you play that involve killing as your option for victory? How many games do you know that involve exchanging money for goods? How many games do you play that acknowledge a Western culture only and nothing else? Or if any other culture is acknowledged, it's weird and strange and foreign. If your game has white phosphorus in it, and this is not a dig at them, if your game has white phosphorus in it, how is it framed? Because it's certainly not the first one to do it. So how is it shown? And if you don't challenge it, if you never show it, this does become normal. Because no one did anything en masse exceptionally. And the person who stands out just stands out. And no, you don't have to be an existential crisis in a game. And no, you don't have to be a really overt political commentary on climate change. But you are still engaging with politics. It's kind of like air. And they contribute to everything. We inhale, we exhale, and you are inhaling someone else's air at all times. You can't escape it. As long as we exist, several people in here just went, ugh. No matter where we as humans go, we will take the air with us. Even if we go to space, joke's on you, we bring the air with us. You cannot escape the politics. It's like trying to tease a single thread out of a ball of yarn. And I don't mean like the piece of wool, I mean the tiny bit inside the wool. When you pull that up, the whole yarn ball comes with it. And even if you make the stars align and the holy grail of chosen games that is somehow miraculously apolitical, and no, I am not saying this is an apolitical thing, it won't matter because the world will do it for you. It does not matter how apolitical your game is because the games industry will never be apolitical. The game's consumption will never be apolitical, and someone will twist that for their agenda no matter how much you try otherwise. We are stuck in this place that we can't escape, that we kind of also don't want to be in. Can't make apolitical games, no matter how much you try. It's a cycle. Trying obeys unintentionally. And even if you realize this, at this stage where we're at, moving through our teal layers, you are probably going to feel helpless about it. Because you don't want to fight the fight, but you also don't want to hurt anyone. You don't want to confront people, but you don't want to be the person who has to be confronted. So you're stuck. And we've entered the second last state of helplessness. And I see the games industry is like that right now. A lot of the industry is asking, should I be making games? Is there even really a reason to make games? Will I ever make a good game or not? Are games really that important? Nothing I do is right or wrong, and at some point you want to stop trying, because is there really a point? And at some point you might ask yourself, is it really worth it? And I'm sure at some point everyone has asked, are games really worth it? Because when you get to this stage, you just feel really alone. And this is what I wanted to give to you. Because I'm not a games designer, I'm an analyst. And I see the power that's in games. And I see the power that comes from knowing what you can do. I see the power that comes from acceptance. Regardless of what you think they are, politics are inescapable. And political discourse is used to normalize and create a status quo, but you can do something with that. You can have a power through knowledge. So this is what I wanted to do with my talk. First, we're going to change this triangle. We're going to flip it upside down. And we're going to get rid of these layers, because we don't like them anymore. And I like to destroy things I don't like. And we're going to go through some different understandings. Same concepts, but now politics as a foundation. You are analysing your product through message conveyance into someone's home. You are exploring things with them, discussing them with them. You are helping them discover for themselves a new way or a better way or a way they didn't know existed at all. And you are reaching this mutual understanding together, which is the core of what I wanted to do, which was empowerment. So I've created a new layer for you, and for everyone that you contact, and for every game you work on, and for every piece you work on. This idea of empowerment, which was more in line with what GCAP wanted, because as I was going through this talk, I was like, wow, it's going to be like a funeral in here. Everyone's going to be like, I didn't sign up for this. Look, I get that you're goth, but this is just weird. I wanted it to be GCAP lighting the way oriented, and I wanted to give you something. I receive your games, which is great, and I receive players playing with them, which is great, but I want to give you something from a consumer. Because in lighting the way, you are a light. You shine brightly and you illuminate what is real. You give a voice to those who do not have one, and you give shape to those who are unseen through your games. And to me, that makes you superheroes. And I want you to know how powerful you are. I want you to know the good you can do. And it's going to suck the entire way. But you need to help and support each other. Because we, as consumers, and you are consumers of media too, relate to the world via what we know, and that's it. And we only know as what we are taught. Because at one point in time, we were just tiny babies, and all we cared about was screaming and food in and food out. That's it. So every way we relate to the world, we were taught that. And you, as game designers, are a part of that teaching process, whether you want it to be or not. So rather than making an apolitical game, my question would be then, what are you teaching people? Because you may not be giving them an existential crisis, like I got this morning with Amy. Thanks, Amy. You may not be giving them an intrusion, but you are normalizing something. You are making something visible and real. Because the world doesn't see the individual. We don't. We see someone based on how many screens they're projected on, and you have control over screens. It's how we know who politicians are, because they're on screens. It's how we know who celebrities are, because they're on screens, because people talk about them. But when you're a part of a marginalized community, that screen real estate is taken very quickly. And rather than trying to ask, hey, can we have some more, we're left fighting over the scraps that are left, which is not the way it should be. Because when you have a single person and the world doesn't see them, you make them real by increasing how many of them there are. You make them real by helping them connect with something that's real, and you make the world see them real, as real because of how many of them there are in this world. And that might require over-representation or under-representation of other things, but that is the power that you have to choose that. This is what I wanted to do for you. I'm not talking about politics as an inescapable more because it's bad or good. It's a statement of fact. What I want to give you is something that was given to me. So some of you, I'm going to end this on a little anecdote. And the reason why I decided to come up here and talk about this is the reason. So in December 2011, Simpsons aired an episode called Holidays of Future Past. I don't watch The Simpsons. I don't watch The Simpsons. In 2014, I was watching Simpsons clip for an assignment. And this clip came up where Milhouse and Lisa had a daughter together. And I promise you, the blue curl of hair is purely coincidental. I was already dyeing my hair before then. But their daughter's name was Zhia. And I cried. I wasn't even paying attention to the snippet. But when I heard those voice actors say her name, these people who didn't know me, my name to them was a real name. Not because they knew me and I validated it, not because they were like, hey, I knew someone named Zhia, but because to them, Zhia was a real name, a girl's name. And why was I crying? I don't know. For a moment, I was like, my friends know my name. My mum gave me my name. My boss says my name. My coworkers say my name. Why am I crying? And it was because these people who didn't know me not only acknowledged that my name was a real name, they projected it to 8 million people. To 8 million people, my name was a real name. So I was real in that moment. To people who will never meet me, to people who will never know I exist. But I was real. And that's the power that you have. So don't worry about this idea of can we make apolitical games. Chuck that out. Get rid of that. We don't care about that anymore. That's not the question we should be asking. The question I am asking you, and the question I want you to ask your friends and your colleagues and your fellow game devs from here on out, is who are you making real? Thank you. Okay, so we were 10 minutes faster than I was in every single practice run. So I'm assuming at some point someone in the audience went, who is she and why is she speaking at the speed of light? Which is okay. But that means we have time for questions. Now, before everyone throws their hands up if they do, there's a microphone that will be brought around, and I would like us to be kind to our volunteer. Please don't sit there with your hand like this. That's what my Try One students do. Here's my exercise. Everyone raise both arms into the air. Yeah, we have functioning arms. That's how high I expect question arms to be. If anyone had any doubts, I was a teacher. Okay, who has questions? Good, I'm gone, bye. No questions? Oh, yes. Please be gentle with the questions. I'm not a politician.
Hi, firstly, that was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
I think I speak from everyone in the room in saying that. I've had a background in games criticism, and I've seen fellow journalists torn apart for celebrating politics in games and factoring it into the reviews. I wondered what sort of advice you might have to those that see politics in games and celebrate that and champion that and want to share that with others despite what might await them.
So that was a decision I had to make in coming up here, because I realized that if I phrase this wrongly and if it went out on the internet and it was received badly, it's going to go badly. What I recommend is you get a really strong support network who will not abandon you, who validate you, and acknowledge that the detractors, and what was really powerful for me is the people who are angry feel threatened. It's not that they hate me. It's not that they know who I am and hate me. And it's not even really that they actually wish harm upon me. I have made them feel threatened, and they are responding in the only way humans know how, which is to attack. We're kind of a prey species that made itself teeth and claws, and we're not quite sure what to do with them. So whenever we feel threatened, rather than contemplate who we are and what we're doing and why we feel threatened, most people just respond with verbal violence. And that knowledge felt empowering to me, because the people who lash out like that are scared. And I can't feel threatened by someone who's scared. Also, my boyfriend's really big. So he makes me feel safe. But don't engage in any way that you aren't prepared for the backlash. And when the backlash gets too much, that's okay. Take a step back and surround yourself with things that are cute, like kittens. There's nothing wrong with protecting yourself, but I think it's also really important to take that step and celebrate politics and the political discourse in games. So self-care first, and kittens and puppies, but also know you're doing the right thing. Cool. Sorry, that was a really long-winded response. Any other? Did that answer your question, by the way? Absolutely. Okay, cool.
Thank you. Can you put your Twitter handle back up on the screen? I didn't catch it before, sorry. It's not really a question, I know.
No, we're gonna go far. Let's see if I can, because it's right at the start. No, let me just click through this.
Sorry.
That's all right. I should have put it at the end. You can see my slides in reverse. I'm so disappointed too, because in the version of PowerPoint that I had, there's a cool effect where the triangle like shifts and moves, and I'm like, yes, my whole talk is around this triangle. It's not here, and I'm sad. Yes. Oh, I didn't make the sound effects. No, now I'm on the spot and I'm nervous. There's my Twitter handle.
Thank you.
You can follow me, but be aware, like, there's a lot of politics. Anyone else?
Why do you think that politics is such a big issue for people who might recognise as politics in the music they listen to, for example? I'm thinking, like, you know, a lot of gamers are metalheads and they understand the political implications of the metal they listen to, but they don't want to see that same kind of thing reflected in their games.
I think for some people it's that embracing of this idea of escapism. So they've accepted that, oh, when I listen to this music, I'm taking on board this political discourse. But when I play games, I have signed an unspoken contract that I don't have to think about those same things in games. It's literally I'm escaping the crap of the world. And so it's that idea of trust again. They've compartmentalized where politics belong or where they accept it and where they won't accept it. So when someone else makes that decision for them, it's again, I feel threatened. My choice has been taken from me. And I think it's really important to do that anyway, because for people that are underrepresented or people who are, you know, kind of thrown under the bus, the politics are there regardless. It's just that people became really comfortable that this is the place where I don't have to think about how crap the world may be or how painful some people have it or how good I may have it, because I'm sure everyone in here at some point has gone, wow, my life sucks. And then you have that whole, oh, first world problems kind of thing. But it's the place where they don't have to think about it, and suddenly they have given no choice but to think about it. And it's more about they had the choice taken from them, where they're upset about it. They've compartmentalized it. That's not acceptable in games, and we just have to move through that.
Cool, thanks.
Anyone else? Oh.
So do you think that there is a way to kind of minimize that feeling of intrusion while still normalizing, you know, marginalized voices or what might be referred to as political kind of topics, or you can't have your cake and eat it too?
For some things, yes, absolutely. But for others, no. For example, you will not be able to have any kind of trans representation in your game without someone going, politics, because you can't make that overtly. If you want to make it covert, you would have to make sure that there was enough message conveyance there that it was apparent, but not shoehorned in, and that's like a slider that's different for every person. So for someone like me, I'm like, oh, that's cool, you've got someone here who's a person of colour, that makes me feel really good. And for someone who just genuinely doesn't like people of colour in their game, that slider's never going to be acceptable. It's probably going to be one of those things of, if you want to broach a sensitive topic, you'll have to do a crap ton of research. If you want to broach a topic that requires intrusion, you probably shouldn't even try and be subtle. You should just make them accept it.
Thanks.
Okay, no more questions? Can I go have a panic attack now? Yeah, thank you so much for coming.